All right. Well, welcome everyone to a very, very special episode of Dark Corners. It's one that I'm very excited about. We have just wrapped up, as you may know, if you've been following us, the 13th episode, which is the end of the first season of Dark Corners. 13 stories now, and that will be the pattern. And we'll resume the second season on June the 1st. So that leaves us a little bit of time here in May. We did have one episode, that 13th episode here in May, just barely made it into the month of May. But there will be an interlude, and that's why we'd like to post, while we're posting this really special episode, a live interview with the person behind all that wonderful, great, creepy music on Dark Corners, Mombi Ullman. So Mombi, welcome to Dark Corners. It's great to have you here and have a chance to
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, well, this is exciting for me, and I think it'll be really a lot of fun and get a little bit of behind the scenes kind of take on what goes on about the music. And the music, I mean, I've got to tell you, it just adds so much. I have fun making up the stories and then recording them. I don't know how other people are about hearing their own voices, but you kind of like, it always sounds different to you when you hear it. You can always find a million things wrong with it. But when I add that music to it, it's like it just transforms and it becomes this another thing, another life of is given to it with that kind of music. So I was searching for something like that, knowing that I wanted to have some background music. That's what brought me to you. And I know there are people that just provide ambient music and learned a little bit more about that. But I doubt that's what your purpose was when you went into it. You probably weren't just looking, oh gosh, let me provide some music for some podcaster somewhere. But how did you get into the process of making, dark ambient sound?
Right. Yeah, it's a loaded question. Because there's so many avenues and everything. I got into it. I've always been a fan of soundtracks and film scores. So when I started out doing music, I kind of got into the industrial scene, approached it like I'm going to be writing songs, but even that was more soundtracky kind of. I always want to incorporate melodics and this and that. So I was just obsessed with soundtracks, and that's kind of what I needed to be making was soundtracks. When I came across ambient music, I realized that there were subgenres of ambient that were more soundtrack-like. And then I came across, I didn't know people were actually creating dark ambient, what we call dark ambient. And I was like, there's really no difference between this and the soundtracks I grew up with, like that format. But that's when I realized like that's what I wanted to be making. That was the avenue. There I could express myself in a million different ways, and without having to confine myself so much to a particular genre or anything. So and also I love the kind of the storytelling aspect of making a dark ambient album. You can kind of go in there and just tell your own story, So, but yeah, I can thank my girlfriend though, because she listened to a lot of ambient music, and when I met her, she introduced me to a lot of styles of ambient that I wasn't used to, and then it just kind of from there grew. Again, loaded question.
Yeah, I can see that you could have come from a lot of different places to arrive at where you are now, but and then without being very proficient in the field, but just a little bit of exposure, it still seems like your work is rather unique. And what seems like it to me is that storytelling aspect of it. That there's just a concept or a suggestion of a story, whether or not, I mean, you do provide a little bit of background, just a minimal amount of text for each collection of tracks that you offer, the albums, but there is a story there. And I think that's kind of, for me, obviously it's something that I love, the power and the suggestion of a story. You mentioned on your website too, the term soundscape, which I think is a really neat idea. It kind of seems like that cinematic quality too. What is it that you mean when you reference or you use the word soundscape? Soundscape,
yeah. I would say Wendigo was a really good example of soundscape. Soundscape being, it's subjective, but I consider a soundscape something that's a little less melodic, and a little less in your face, and you're exploring just a sheet of sound, and you're gradually coming in with this and that, and you're exploring noise and incorporating maybe soft, subtle, is it their melody? That's the real soundscape. And I think the majority of Wendigo was, I went in with that idea of a soundscape, and there were a couple things that got a little too melodic, and they were really good pieces, but I actually, after I was completed with those pieces, I was like, this isn't going to work. You got to take it out. So that's what I did. And then I replaced it with something that was more true to what I went in. However, those unused tracks are actually going into another thing, so they didn't get thrown away. So,
yeah, that's neat. They'll always find their way, I'm sure, into something else, because you just going to fit in better. But it does seem like if it's not an actual storyline, that pieces like that or collections like that in Wendigo do take a person on a journey of sorts. I mean, it may not have a well mapped out track of where you're taking the person, or maybe it does, but it definitely seems like you are washing someone and making them react and feel. And I don't know, do you see it like a journey?
When I'm actually in the composition phase, like actually making the music, do I look at it as a journey? It's an interesting process, because I usually go in with an idea and I'll just start composing. I'm like, this sounds more intense. This sounds like a chase theme, or this sounds there. And I'll go ahead and go with the music and the feel of it. I'm like, that's the mood. That's the atmosphere I'm going with. Not sure where it's going to fit in the album quite yet. But then I'm like, okay, we want to take those same groups of instruments and do something completely different. So you start gradually piecing together, and it starts to come to you, and it starts to form a story. I usually just go in with a single idea. Like with Witchworks, I knew I needed a dark ambient 80s horror film score, very much so in the vein of John Carpenter. I didn't know an actual story, though. I knew the mood I wanted to evoke. I knew when you've done so much at this point, you know that the story is going to come in the end. And there were even things I didn't piece together until I was done with the entire album. And then I arranged the tracks in the order that would sound like. I was like, you got a story here. But I think key is not, at least for me, I don't talk about exactly what's going on. I like the listener to piece it together a bit. So, yeah.
One of the things about I was thinking of in terms of writing a story, you just mentioned it, that there might be a point where you go, this sounds like a chase scene or an opportunity for something like that. Do you ever try, when you're, I guess it's more in the act of piecing it back together again, do you try to like maybe follow and writing a story? Often if you're going with a traditional pattern, you know, you set your setting, basically the situation, add a little conflict and tension, builds to a climax, and it may or may not, especially with horror, it might have some resolution at the end where things kind of calm out. Sometimes it seems like some of your stories, your albums did do that. So I wondered if you did consciously go back and say, oh, I want to create this mood here first and then build up a little tension. Did Tasty Humans have anything like that going on? Like you kind of have, it seemed like there's almost a story there.
There is. Even that one's one of the more vague stories for me. I still feel like I listen to it and I'm still piecing stuff together. That one, yeah, I mean, it kind of, there are times where I know that there's a chase towards the end. You have an opening, you built some tension, but you're missing something between this and that. And that's one of the good things about not being specific about the story, because you might not even know exactly what it is, but you know that's where that needs to be. So yeah, there were times with Tasty Humans. Tasty Humans was kind of this one thing though, where it's just complete randomitis, because I was really doing like some weird scratchy lo-fi ambient throughout that. So
yeah,
Yeah, but certainly there's a story, but it takes place in the 50s and during the times of drive-in movies and whatnot. That one, more than any, was all about weird soundscapes and just, you know. But yeah, sometimes I have had to compose things just because there needs to be something. But I don't, when I go in and compose it, I don't go, okay, there needs to be some kind of filler. Like, go ahead, go in the studio, have some fun, do something, but it needs to stay like this. You don't need another climactic sounding something. Just take it easy. You know, depends on the area it needs to be. So.
Well, that's cool. Well, and speaking of Tasty Humans specifically, there's a song, I think Ringo Just Ate My Baby. Or
And a ringo, yeah, it was some
that's
kind
a
of
plant. That's a flower, right?
Yeah, but
and I
yeah,
looked it up and I thought this is an alien-looking bloom. So I wondered. So what was the story behind that particular flower? Did you?
No, it was a play on the whole. What was that movie, A Cry in the Dark, with Sam Neill? And that famous line was, "A dingo ate my baby. A dingo ate my baby." So. I wrote the piece of music, and as I was composing it, it sounded like a plant, something going, like opening up a windowsill. If you pay attention, you hear something opening. I imagine it's like a window opening, and these tentacles start, or these vines start coming through the window and through the kitchen, and you hear the TV in the back, and I just kind of picture something. Maybe there's a baby sitting there. And anyway, a ringo being a plant, you know, I'm not sure that would be the actual. I guess because these aliens look like plants, you know, just call it a ringo. But well, yeah, it's
a good image. Yeah, people should look it up because it does have kind of spiky kind of petals or whatever.
Yeah, it worked out that way, because even I think when I looked that up, I didn't even know it would look like that. I was just like, meant to be.
Yeah. That's great when things just fall together like that.
They do, and you'll find a lot of times that happens with making these concept albums. You know, things just kind of fit together eventually.
And there's something to the quality of how that plays, because when I'm using your pieces and stories, if I were a really good sound engineer, I'm not even a crappy sound engineer. I'm not good enough to be a crappy sound engineer. But if I were a good one, I would put a lot more effort into thinking about, you know, how the music is fitting in with exactly what's being said at that moment. But what happens for me is I just listen to it after putting some pieces together, and I go, oh man, that worked out just right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's so much fun when that happens, isn't it? Yeah, I love it when that happens. Yeah, definitely.
I'm really lucky that it happens, but the music that you have actually lends itself to that a whole lot, because there are a lot of variations and a lot of things do happen, even if there's repetition. I mean, I say variations, but the repetition is important. Droning sounds are very important with ambient.
I love drones. Yeah. And when I discovered, the thing is, I love drone music before I knew it was an actual thing, like in the ambient community. And like, I was just like, I like to just sit there on one note and just play with it. But yeah, I did that a lot.
It works really well, but then it changes and you have other stuff too that I think works just as well. Since all of your stories, well, some of them lend themselves a little bit more to being a broad story, and then there's some collections that are like definitely every single piece is unique, even though it might be thematically connected. Like, I mean, you've got cryptids are a big thing in a lot of your work, and the triptychs collections. Now you just have released just like a week ago the second volume of triptychs, three tracks together. But they are connected in a way, but they each have their own stories, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, each one has their own story. Basically, triptych is, each time there's a triptych release, it's a series of 3 tracks. And these 3 tracks are based on totally different cryptids from around the world. And a lot of times I want to compose music for these cryptids, but they just won't fit on an album necessarily. Thematically, just sometimes doesn't work. If I'm going to do Mongolian Deathworm, if I were to incorporate it in an album, I have trouble figuring that out. So anyway, for instance, Mongolian Deathworm, like you're just one track. So I'm going to compose something that's dedicated to you and then combine it with 2 others. And they've all got their own stories. And that also allows me to explore other avenues as a composer, someone who wants to express this way, that way. I'm not restricted to the confines of the overall sound of a particular album. So that's what I do with Triptych. It's like I get to explore these different avenues, and thankfully people like that, you know, just a little EP and they understand it. No.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's great. Do you happen to have anything on hand from Triptychs, maybe even the first set?
Yeah, from the first one. Yeah, like, yeah, let's see. Yeah, please. Can you hear that okay?
Yeah. That's cool.
Anyway,
really,
yeah.
cool.
I mean, I'm telling a story throughout it. Yeah. So
yeah, that's neat. But I like the variation. Like I said, it kind of exemplified exactly what we were talking about. There's drones and there's repetition, but there's variety also within the same piece. Now, one thing that's not about the music, but I'm interested in on all the albums that you've got. The art's really fantastic. Where does the art come from?
Well, thank you. Yeah. Utilizing a lot of creativity because you don't know how to use Photoshop or that quite well. Basically, with each release, I was like, you know, I'm going to teach myself how to do the artwork. You know, it's not going to be great, but work with what you got. And that's kind of one of my mottos, really, is like, work with what you got. Okay, what do I know? What can I learn? How do I make this happen? So over time, I've gotten better at working at the artwork. I piece together this and that. Sometimes there'll be some kind of stock image, but I'll manipulate it enough, you know, something that I can legally use. Right. But a lot of times I will turn it on its head completely, change it. You wouldn't recognize it. So a lot of times I'm pulling from this and that. The Tasty Humans cover is like one of my favorites. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, what is that? You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, what it was, I like telling people this is a picture of a giraffe. and it was sticking its tongue out. So I zoomed in on this tongue and just kind of like, I was just like, I'm going to take my time and see what I can do with that tongue. And I put all these filters on it to make it look like some still image out of a black and white movie. And just, I was like, I'll be honest, like I did one track and then that piece, it was going to be this weird single called Don't Touch the Plants. And because of that image and that track I did, I was like, you know what, this is an entire album right here. So we're going to actually take this image and just run with that. That's how Tasty Humans come about. Anyway, really I'm ranting.
And I think when we have the time to edit our time together here into a little bit different format, hopefully we can, well, I'll put some images in from the covers to get that very thing that we're talking about, because I think the art's great. I love it. I think it really
thank
works
you
well.
Yeah thank you. That makes me feel good. Definitely.
Yeah, I pay attention to that as much as anything. I think it's really cool. And speaking of that, I'm going to jump ahead and what my normal pattern was. I'll never seem to stay in what I'm thinking I'm going to do anyway. But this is a natural segue to something I wanted to talk about. People may not realize that they can still they can download the music you have from your website, but they can also order CDs. And you do a very unique thing with packaging for the CDs. And I wonder how you got into that. They're a real pleasure to have. I intend on having them all. I want the complete collection. So, but I want to have them. And I may not, I don't even play CDs that much anymore, but I want to have these.
I'm glad, because I became a lot less materialistic some time back, and I ended up getting rid of all my CDs. So when I went into this, I didn't even think I was going to be making CDs, but I found out that a lot of people still like to collect CDs or what have you. I knew if I was going to have CDs made, they had to be unique, and I didn't want a jewel case and an insert. Yeah. And I thought it'd be better to have them handmade from, I was like, well, how can, take the little envelopes, you put them in, then punch holes, put some string in them, paint it, get creative with it, put a little love in there. And I felt like people would pick up on that, if they felt like actually something with a little love in there.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty cool. It's like getting something special because you open it up and, oh, this is really neat. And you have some little treasures that go along with them. But you can definitely tell it's good quality, but it's handmade. And you know that it's somebody put some time into it. It wasn't something that came off an assembly line somewhere. And it's neat and it goes with the story. Was Witchworks the first, or what was the first CD that you made?
Race of the Appalachian was the first one. And that's when I discovered that I wanted to do that for every release. That's why I went back and did one for Point Pleasant also.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so it started out with Race of the Appalachian. I want to have that, put the jute twine on it. So that every time I do a new release, I'm like, okay, what color's the string going to be on it? And it always comes with like a sticker. And now it's become mandatory pretty much. It's like a staple. I have to have like a descriptive piece of paper with some artwork on there or something. So that's the little things like that are always like this new challenge. It's like, okay, what's this going to look like, or this or that. So yeah.
Well, that's fun. I know it could end up being a chore, but I hope you still enjoy doing them.
Yeah, I do. And I plan on continuing making the CDs. And someone asked me the other day about more tapes, because Witchworks was practically made to be listened to on a tape. That's why you hear a lot of tape hiss in there. But I did get 100 of those made because it just had to be done. As far as the future, though, that costs money to get those on tape and shrink wrapped and all that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to see if it ends up being, productive or efficient to do it that way. But it's definitely worth. I'm glad you did experiment with it, and I hope the CDs and everything continue too, and that you keep trying different things. I think it's neat that there's so many different ways of artistic expression that you can do, and not just I mean, the music's great, but then all of a sudden there's other stuff that goes along with it that people I don't know if people are realizing, and if they explore that, and when they see it on your website, if they really catch on when it says CD available, it's more than just a CD. It's really an experience to get the CD and the joy of opening up and going, it's really cool. If it looks like, I mean, the Witchworks, for example, is the one. It looks like a little album, like a vinyl record, and has the orange and black. I mean, it's a Halloween album for sure.
Yeah, no, good. I'm glad to hear that. Cause
what's the story? I mean, your story behind Witchworks, if you don't mind. That that was my introduction. That's when I found you first. I think was through that. I'm not sure why.
Basically, Witchworks. I think the reason I first got my first synthesizer was because I loved horror scores so much. Like, I loved those soundtracks, and there were old composers like John Carpenter and Richard Band and these guys that just did these soundtracks I love. So I just knew I wanted something that made that drony sound you hear in all those John Carpenter movies. And where I'm getting to is that I've always wanted to make Witchworks. That was like, it wasn't called Witchworks back then. I just knew I wanted to make a soundtrack that seemed kind of like one of those old 80s John Carpenter, Fabio Frizzi, whatever, something that felt like in that vein. I mean, that's really what I've always wanted to do more than anything. I feel like I could die and be a happy man because I made the album.
You did it.
Yeah, that was my pinnacle thing I wanted to do. So that it just got to the point. It's like, okay, I'm actually making albums now. Go ahead and do that. And that's my love for horror soundtracks right there more than anything.
For me, it's always going to be associated with Halloween. It seems like Halloween was definitely a part of it. It had to be in your head a little bit. It's very orange and black. Physically, definitely. Visually, and I'm a Halloween fanatic and would love Halloween. I love Halloween year round. So,
I'm glad people get that autumnal feel with it, because I mean, it's also my love for Halloween time. And I feel like a lot of those horror soundtracks, certain ones, not all of them, but like, especially, again, I keep going back to John Carpenter, but when I hear those, like, I feel fall. I can see the leaves falling and all that. And like, definitely wanted that, down to the point I have a track called Leaves in there, you know?
Yeah.
So, definitely all that place.
Well, for folks like us, that is a really special time. And when the temperature turns and the leaves start to change, the whole season and Halloween itself, everything associated with it is just, it's a really cool feeling. And to be able to capture that and convey that, which I think happens for me in that album, that particular one. I love all the other things too, but for some reason that one speaks very much of Halloween to me. So
yeah, it's definitely, it's my Halloween album. So.
Well, that's definitely good. I'm glad to do that. You've already told me a little bit about the cinematic influences for you, but so did you actually end up buying soundtracks to movies? Was that something that was an influence? Or did you just listen to them as you watched a movie and loved them that way?
When I was younger, like, I went to the store and bought CDs to horror soundtracks. When Amazon come along, finally, back in the mid-late 80s, whenever that was, and I was first getting on the internet, I can remember that was like one of my earliest internet memories, was buying the soundtrack to Halloween 2. I just have this immense CD collection. It was nothing but soundtracks. And so I think my parents mainly listened to like Van Halen, Pink Floyd and stuff. And I don't know where I got that from. I don't, because nobody in my family really, they
weren't into soundtracks. They were like music, but not soundtracks. Well, you were obviously listening at movies. Movies were affecting you on a lot of different levels. And I guess it affects all of us that way, but not all of us pay attention to it. A lot of us are so wrapped up in the story, we're not necessarily aware or cognizant of the impact of the music. But at an early age, you must have been aware of that music.
Yeah. I think, I'm not sure how that was. It's like movies were my friends when I was little. Movies were there for me. I didn't have that many friends growing up. Like, I mean, I was out in the country and that's what I did, and I was homeschooled from 7th grade up too. So, definitely movies were there for me. And somehow I tapped into the fact that soundtracks could be listened to on their own, That scene was particularly emotional because those notes were being played like that. So, I tapped into that, and to the point is like, if a soundtrack wasn't available, I would sit there with a recorder and tape the end credits music so I could listen to it on tape back in the late 80s or early 90s, whenever that was. I think, I can remember, the soundtrack to Jaws: The Revenge wasn't available. And I love even something like that, or Psycho 3 or something like that. I was always tuned in. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And that's a true fan. And obviously it has had a tremendous impact. And here you are creating the soundtracks when the movies don't exist.
Yeah, man. Like, seriously, I feel like I'm actually doing what I've always wanted to do when I was a kid, is like making soundtracks. It's just, there's no film reel there, and that's fine. But if somebody wants to pick up, like, doing like a night to something, well, I mean, you're telling stories, but I like that the music is accompanying you throughout it. And I like hearing my music in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I was going to ask that. So let me go ahead and follow up on that. You're touching on that. I wondered what it was like, and I have to confess to feeling a little nervous, because when I started using your music, and then you were very gracious and generous with that, with the way that allowing me to do what I wanted to do with these stories. But then I'm thinking, I wonder what Mambi's reaction is going to be when he hears this song that he probably had his own visual thing going on in his head with, and then I'm telling this story and using it in a different way. What was it for you when you hear that?
Yeah, I'm not so obsessed with a particular visual being accompanied to my tracks at all. I want the music to be explored and looked at in different ways. That's one reason I'm so particular about being vague about the story being told. I want people to fill those gaps in. And to me, it's even better if somebody can take those tracks and apply them to a story that has nothing to do with originally. So for me, that's the best thing possible, is like when I'm hearing it accompanying you telling a story. That's what it's all about to me. So.
Well, that's cool. That's great. Well, I have yet as a challenge to myself, and what I'm looking forward to doing is doing it in a different way. Instead of having I write the story and then I go and listen to the different albums of yours, and I listen to see what I think might work, I want to do it backwards. I want to just sit and put the headphones on and let the music play and see what stories come, which is kind of what you do. I feel like it kind of, as you're creating, some things come to you. But I want to see what stories, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to chain myself to this idea, but I'm really thinking that season 2 of Dark Corners may be a lot of that, of me taking some of the things that you have already and seeing what kind of stories I can spread out from them.
Yeah. When you said that, I thought, like, I think that'd be great. Like, see where the sound takes you and go off of that. I think that'd be really interesting. Like,
I'm looking forward to trying that out.
Yeah. I would love for you to do that. I'd be humbled, like, if you did that. That'd be great.
And I might recommend to other people who are listening to this, of course, I want them to hear my stories, but they can also just go to Bandcamp, to mambiuleman.bandcamp.com, and listen and stream. You can do what I was talking about doing, is just listen to that and see where it takes you, and see what kind of things come into your mind as you sit there and let the music play with you. Have your own stories, but I will be writing some too. So we'll
man, like,
happen.
Seriously,
but people can do that, and then they can obviously purchase it and download it from there too. I want to back up to Triptychs again, since you have 2 sets, and there probably will be more collections like that, of 3 stories at a time, 3 tracks at a time. But on the last track of the second volume of Triptychs, there's a really neat track that starts, to me, in a very unique way. It sounded like a accordion, very like old worldy. Can you tell us, maybe play a little bit, and then it changes, but I want to know the background.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, like this. Can you hear my vocals all right?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. That was pretty much, I mean, the Tatzelworm is a Swedish story. It takes place in the Alps. I mean, that's the folklore is there. That's where the whole Tatzelworm derives from. And I just built off of that. So basically, to me, I want to establish that in the Alps feel, I have the accordions and, you know, just kind of have that. And then it gradually gets louder. And like, you almost, I guess there are a lot of images that come to my head. There's nothing really cohesive except that the beginning starts out like you're in a ski lift. And it feels like you're gradually going higher and higher in altitude, and that to the point you have to have a mask on and be breathing, you know, through a tank or something. But the idea is that you were hired to go out and track down this monstrosity that is terrorizing the Alps, and he happens to be way up there. It's, to me, that track is like a complete like roller coaster almost too. It feels like you are going up the slope, and then all of a sudden it just drops, you know, and it's a complete like chase throughout or something. Something bad's going down. So
well, there's a huge transition in that story. I mean, obviously what we just heard, it's very upbeat and not old world, but, you know, it's got that classic feel of the Alps or somewhere, you know, of that kind of, I didn't know.
Did you notice
read the story?
Did you notice, like, when it hits in, like you hear like a yodel in the back? There's even yodeling.
Picture this. That's a little jolly, almost carnival type of feel, and yet then it transitions into a very darker thing, which of course I love, because when it started, it's like, where is this coming from? And I had the question, did you compose that, or did you take an actual song from something that already existed from the culture?
Yeah, like, okay, so it starts out with an actual field recording of some, I don't know, it might have been in a carnival or something. It was one I took and I manipulated and kind of add a little bit of this and that to it. And then I just kind of added, I went over with synthesizers and other field recordings and just kind of made that larger. And then, yeah, even down to the yodeling, that's some kind of field recording I used, and it's there right when it kicks in right there. It's one when I did, I was like, the thing is, I always say this is what the music wants to be. Sometimes I'll go in with an idea and it turns out to be a little bit different, but I was like, no, this is what it wants to be. So I was like, I don't know what you would call this, because it's not what anyone would say is classically ambient. It's not that, but it's again kind of soundtrack music, you know. It has like some industrial beats in there. I mean, but it's very cinematic, I would say, you know? Yeah.
Have you had the chance to play? I guess not, because of what's been going on with the virus, with coronavirus and everything, but have you had a chance to play that from Triptychs 2 live?
Yeah, basically, I queued that up at Cosmic Fields in Florida. Nobody had heard it, and yeah, I had a lot of fun. In fact, that was the track I had. It's not in the footage you see because I made a little video clip of it and everything. But somebody comes in like right after it kicks in. They had to come in and run and turn it down because the cops were around at the time. And there was like some noise complaints, and so they're trying to keep it down, but they didn't expect that from an ambient set.
yeah. Well, I was thinking there have to be reaction. People would have to laugh at the very beginning of it, just that accordion type music and whatnot.
Right.
Smiles on people's faces, like, what's going on with this? This not what you'd expect in ambient music.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, I hope people do find a lot of unexpectedness within, like, if I'm playing a set, you know, I want people to be immersed. And if I see them rolling out there, like dying laughing or something, which did happen at Cosmic Fields, like they were just like, it was just the mood and the atmosphere and the music combined and just made for a really good experience. I'm pretty sure there were a lot of people like during that particular track that were like, what in the world is this?
Yeah. But that's kind of cool too. Very cool, actually. I think to have that kind of a variety of reactions. But I just pictured it that would have to be that way. It made me kind of smile and laugh when I heard it at first, and then be intrigued as to where it was going. And then when it started to shift, it was like, oh wow, here we go. And the whole experience about it that I really liked. So I wanted to find out about that and how that went. Now, you've moved naturally into where I wanted to go, which was about live performances. You touched on what you hope people are getting out of your music. Do you mind revisiting that just a little bit about what you hope somebody who is like at a live performance for you, what that experience, what do you want that experience to be for them?
Well, I want them to be immersed and kind of, you know, a lot of times when people go see a show, they're expecting to dance or this or that. When it's not someone in front of the stage singing, it can be I want to say a challenge, but I mean, doing, and we say live, but I'm actually doing like a DJ would do with his music. I'm just, you know, I'm bringing my controller, I'm playing, but adding to that, you know, with, I guess, a little bit of the glamour and the kind of, you know, doing myself up, wearing a Wendigo mask, things of that nature, and I only want it to grow. I mean, I can envision some crazy things. It's just I got to get around to making these things, and but I want people to be able to sit back in a field and watch and just be fully immersed and go, this is taking me somewhere, you know. A lot of times, like anytime I played, like it's been like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning or something like that. So this time, you know, if people have been at a festival or something, they're just at this point just kind of zoned out, you know, and they can go out there and just kind of enjoy a couple hours of a little bit different kind of music and just
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, you mentioned, but especially for this year, everything's been cut short. I guess the performance you were just talking about, was that in January of this year?
It was in February, I think. February. Yeah, it was right. Yeah, because it was Valentine's Day.
Oh, okay.
That was a great experience. And there were quite a few people out there. I mean, it was primarily a psychedelic trance, psytrance event. And it just, I played one other psytrance festival in Asheville, and it all kind of fits, you know, the whole, I usually play at a chill out stage, is what they call a chill stage. So people that want to get away from the dance for a bit, they can escape, just kind of chill out. And yeah, I mean, people have been very responsive to it. Like very good words have been said, and people seem to want that to happen again. So, I mean, I foresee like in the future, like having maybe more props and more to the visual aspect. Like if I could have people dressed like Mothman and the Tatzelworm running around while this music's going, I mean, I think it would be okay to like Alice Cooper it up just a little bit, you know. Maybe we'll see. That's the plan anyway.
Oh, I think it would be absolutely. I wanted to ask if you would also consider depending on the type of music, sometimes you could, like you say, camp it up, but then other times I can see dance. I can see all sorts of people who, with a background in dance, you know, interpretive dance or whatever, you want, being a part of the experience when you've got light and a lot of different effects that could happen from that. Yeah, I can see this being a multi-sensual experience.
I think so. If it can happen, then I want to make it happen. You know, that's kind of the idea. So I'm actually all ears when it comes to ideas about what could be further incorporated into the shows. So I would like, so if you ever come up with any ideas, let me know. Or if anybody else,
we're stewing on the idea for Halloween too. I've still got an idea back there that we might be able to try out. We just have to cross our fingers, and who knows what's going to happen with I mean, what happened to you here? You were going to have your plan, I think, was this was the Wendigo year, and so the live performances would have been, you know, the stag.
I said that Wendigo was, or 2020 was the year of Wendigo for me, and I don't know. I mean, maybe saying that cursed everything, but I do know there's a different kind of trickle effect happening from the whole Wendigo thing. My plan was to wear that mask every show, you know, and at least I got to do it at Cosmic Fields. I had this vision of having there in my red, wearing that mask, and it ended up being better than I anticipated. Even my girlfriend Barushka, she got in it, and she had her antlers on, and there was like some improv moments between me and her. Like I was on the stage and she was down on the ground, and there's just like some real interesting magic going on there. And it just kind of like one day I'll release that footage, what little is there, but it's
I did see there are little clips, and you have some still photos, I think, from that on your Facebook page.
Yeah.
A still shot or two.
Yeah,
but that's that'd be great to, I think that would be a really cool experience. But I do think it'd be it's a different experience for sure. But as you said, it's more like DJing, and maybe it'll become VJing with the more visual aspect of it. But you're into it at that point in time, and you're not really having to manipulate a whole lot of, you're not playing, you're not having to layer things. It's already pretty much produced.
Yeah, these are pretty much me, just like any DJ would do, is take music and they just make it a set, you know. If one day I could incorporate live musical elements, I will. It's pretty much just, you know, I produce everything here in the room, and then it becomes a WAV file, and that's it. For me to take a keyboard and hook up to the computer and utilize other elements, that's like a whole nother world to me. And I think eventually, in some small way, I'll be able to perform more, maybe have an actual live instrument in there. I mean, you never know. Basically, I'm seeing where these avenues lead. So
right, Well, I'll look forward to that, because I look forward to any of it. I hope that eventually, not too much more time is going to pass before we'll have venues opened up again. I don't want it to happen before it's safe, but I would look forward to the time when we can do that. And,
I'm hoping. Like, I don't know, man, because I was supposed to play at Equinox maybe this year in Asheville, and I don't know. That's in that's September, so I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think everybody's on hold, waiting to see what's going to happen, and you know.
Yeah, the whole COVID thing put a damper on that, but.
Yeah, that's true. That was the other question too, just the sad part of all this, and many sad parts to all of this. But for performers, it really does rob you of a good part of not only income, but of your outlets for being able to do things. How has it affected you? How has this whole COVID-19 thing affected you?
I'm very fortunate in the fact that my job is an essential business, so I'm fine for the most part as far as things like that goes. I feel really bad for people who are out of a job right now. Me personally, and as an artist, I don't feel like it's changed anything, to be honest. I'm still on this. I had a vision before all this went down, and I'm sticking with my vision. I don't, I even saw some ambient artists, like, we're inspired by some things in a weird way from the virus, and
Yeah.
I don't find any inspiration whatsoever from this virus going on. It would be the equivalent of, like, if Sasquatch or aliens were in everybody's front yard and everybody was talking about it, I would no longer be interested in writing music about UFOs. So creatively, though, I'm still on this album I'm working on now, and it's just grown. If anything, I guess I've gotten more creative by being, I was going to say cooped up, but I'm not even really cooped up any more than I usually am. So I'm just on your usual creative role.
Well, I share a lot of that same feeling, because I stay cooped up. I kind of live like a hermit to some extent. So, and I don't have any desire to write about this. It's the exact same feeling that you just said. I don't have any desire to write about that anymore. We're living it. It's all around. I don't. Yeah. That's not the kind of story. It's scary, but that's not what I want to write about. I think that there will be a lot of virus stories, and things will come out after the fact. But I don't have any desire to do that.
One of the elements, I mean, as storytellers, is that we like escapism.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy creating escapism more than I enjoy watching a movie these days to escape now. I feel like I want to be that storyteller. So, we like to provide an escape instead of a reminder of the horrors of reality.
And I think that's a really neat point. I've asked myself and try to do a little self-analysis, like, why am I so absorbed and into dark, spooky, scary, deathly images and storytelling? And I thought, well, I actually think there's some therapy in that. I think, like you said, it's escapism, but it's also somehow a way that you can manage that story, especially as the storyteller. And as a listener or a reader, you know that there's an end to it, and that you can dive into it and just enjoy the experience of it, as opposed to something that you experience in real life. So sometimes I think it's therapeutic to go into the dark side of things and enjoy them. We like that stuff. That's why horror movies exist and why haunted houses exist. People pay big bucks to go to be terrified in really scary places, but it's controlled. In the most part, then they know there's an end to it, and they feel like they've done something when they've got to the end of it. So that must be a little bit about, I mean, your music is not, well, at times it's very spooky and very eerie, and it does create, I don't know if you have anything that you would consider terrifying. Do you have things that you feel like are like really super scary?
I think there may be moments in Point Pleasant I find particularly creepy. I think I always like to keep with creepy and atmospheric, ghostly, I tend to stray from depressing, dark. There are a lot of great dark ambient artists out there who they tap into that and they do a good job. I just can't revisit it that much. With what I do, occasionally I can go into some very dark areas, but I know how to blend it, and keep it something that I feel like something that you'd want to come back to and revisit, and it doesn't put a damper on your day or something.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're developing a brand of your ambient music?
I wonder sometimes. I went in it wanting to just express myself and hope that you kind of find your voice as you go along. And I discovered that I genuinely want to be a storyteller, but I'm not a writer, but I can express through music. And over the course of, by the third album or so, I realized what was kind of my voice and music and stuff. And a lot of times I will tell a story a drastically different way. I've been told that the music sometimes I've been told that the music sounds like it's from a totally different composer at times, but I've also been told that you can always tell the trademarks, even though it's so vastly different. there's something there that lets me know that's Mombi Ullman.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and even you discover your voice through trial and error and releasing stuff and making stuff. And I think that's what's happened is like finally at this point, yeah, definitely. I think I've found that what people can go in and somewhat expect, you know, a little bit.
I imagine that is very true. And I think just as an experience of writing, and I didn't start really, I wrote all my life, but I didn't start to try to publish till I was retired from being a teacher. Because if one thing, I had time to do it, but you do, I think, begin to develop without being conscious of it, sort of a voice that your style. And even though your music is all over the place with a lot of different things going on, I think there probably is an element where it will be, that's Mombi Ullman, you know, in the midst of all that.
I feel like that does happen. Yeah. It's kind of been revelationary to me to find that out, but you know,
and probably an evolving thing that continues to go on the more music that you create.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It'll change, but there's still will probably be an element of something that's just present that you go, yeah, that's Mombi.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm doing this new album now, and there's even though it's much more of a tribal, organic, very layered, epic. There's a moment or two in there I'm like, that's from Witchworks. Kind of that right there sounds a little bit like Point Pleasant or something like that. You know, there are certain melodies and notes and this that, you know, you play with and manipulate into something else. And, you know, there's a reminiscence of something, you know, else within the other album. So
that's cool. Well, right. With that in mind, what's coming up next? What's the latest project or what we can expect to hear soon?
Yeah, well, this is pretty much official announcement. It's there is an album I'm working on called A Shaman's Warning, Further Tales of Wetiko. And it literally, like, there were some pieces from Wendigo that I really liked, and I didn't want them not to be on something, but they were specifically Wendigo. Like, I didn't want to actually take the tracks and rename them and apply them to something else. Like, I was like, this Wendigo. So I decided I was going to release an EP of just those tracks. And then I was like, well, you need a little something else. And once I started composing other things to accompany it, it ended up being this huge album. Like, I was like, there's a point I went, okay, this is an album officially. And ironically, it's turned into probably the biggest undertaking. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, very shamanic meets tribal creepiness, I guess.
Oh,
but yeah. I mean, basically, if you have Wendigo and the lore and the Native American lore around Wendigo, and I basically had a album of different characters and creatures, and it's turned into a good thing, I think. So.
Oh, that's cool. Is there any way we can get a little taste of it? Got anything that you can hear?
Yeah. One thing is that a lot of people don't realize like how far back Sasquatch goes. And I got a track called Sasquatch. And that was the original, I guess, Algonquin way of saying Sasquatch back then or something. Anyway, but yeah, I'll play a little piece from that. And I might even have a little bit of a live element here. Let me see.
That's really cool. That sounds great.
Thank you. Really yeah, I mean, people have always want a Sasquatch track, I'm sure, at this point.
That's what's been missing in their lives. They've been saying, that's what I've needed.
I need some Sasquatch dark ambient, dude.
Well, there is something about that tribal feeling, and it gets in the blood that, you know, we all like it. The percussive element is something that, I don't know, it is primal. It does go into us and take us back. So
yeah, which is always kind of a challenge for me because I no longer delve too much with beats and all that. So it's kind of been fun to go in there and like take some real like drum elements and explore that and just have fun with it, you know? So, yeah.
Where do your samples of stuff come from? Do you create a lot of them? I've heard orchestral music. I've heard chorus of voices. If I was really amazed at that, like, where is that coming from? Do you just find these, or how do you go about creating those?
Yeah, it's the instruments I use, the VSTs I use. I have various choirs and top-notch recordings of orchestra, like every instrument in an orchestra. I could make an entire symphony if I knew how, but I basically take elements from orchestra, incorporate it into synthesizers, which something some of my favorite soundtracks did was incorporate actual orchestra with synthesizers. What I like about the elements I use is that they're not synthesized orchestra. I mean, even though I'm playing on a keyboard, those are all wave files of actual somebody taking a violin or someone playing one of the many various flutes I can play. It's a pretty good the packages I use. I really love them. Obviously, I have a lot of fun with. Yeah.
Well, it probably took. I imagine it's taken years and years to compile. And are you always collecting and or creating the samples?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of like this recorder here, this Zoom H4n. It's a field recorder, and sometimes I'll record my own stuff through here, and do that. In fact, a lot of Tasty Humans was nothing but recordings that I manipulated and just made weird stuff out of. And but a lot of times you can go online, go freesound.org, and
Freesound.
You can take stuff that are in the Creative Commons in there and go to town with it and have fun. You know, I mean, honestly, again, I keep going back to Tasty Humans, but the way that started out, you would not believe. It was just literally I took in a microphone. I get to tell the story for the first time. It's great.
Yeah.
I took a microphone and I just was like, I wanted to experiment with a particular thing in the studio called Omnisphere. And it comes with a whole bunch of sounds, but I want to take my own sound, run it through there and see what happens. So just as a demo, I just went in the microphone. I just went, okay. I'm like, take that noise and do something with it. So I did. And that track ended up becoming Don't Touch the Plants. Don't Touch the Plants is nothing but that sound right there I just made. Literally just that ran through Omnisphere and me doing weird stuff to it. And that's how that album started out, along with the cover image. I mean,
well, I can promise you that I'm going back to Tasty Humans just to listen to that. With that knowledge, I've got to go back.
Just remember that going in. No, you can't unhear it.
Yeah. Well, this has really been a lot of fun, and finding out about a lot of the background of how you go about your business of making these wonderful sounds and how they've transformed my stories has been incredible. And I hope that we have the chance to do that again. I hope that we personally get a chance to meet up. We had planned to in March. I mean, we were like a week away. I was ready to come down to Cary in the Raleigh area. And also I was going to the coast as well for the book that I wanted to work on. And then all of a sudden we all got shut down, and that was not going to be in the foreseeable future. So sometime though, we will get together and
it will happen.
Face, and that'll be really fun. And what I'm looking forward to is actually getting a chance to see you in a live performance as well, because I think that would be kind of a fun experience.
Yeah,
I'll probably be the oldest one there.
No, 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 no. Anytime I
true?
play the show, there's so yeah, wide variety of people. No, I think it'll be great, man. It'll happen, and I mean, most of these things happen in Asheville. I feel like so it's only eventually.
So that's home for me, so that'll be an easy enough thing to do. So, well, listen, it's been really great having you on Dark Corners. It's really made for a really special transition from our season 1 to season 2, and then with the teaser out there that there may be a lot of more. Well, there is definitely a lot more Mamba Ullman going to be present in season 2, but maybe in an even more unique way, inspiring the stories themselves. So we'll see where that takes. Really cool. All right, Mamba Ullman. Remember, everybody, you can go to that website at mambaullman.bandcamp.com and download the music. I recommend getting the CD because the packaging is so cool. You get little treasures in there. Who knows what's going to happen? We might get charms with the shaman, piece that's coming up.
Right? Yeah, just maybe. You never know with the next one.
So there are going to be some neat things there. But anyway, you take care, and everybody stay tuned. You keep watching us. There'll be a story June 1st. We'll be back on with original stories. So goodbye, everybody.
Take care.